Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to Empty Cloud Monastery. We're here tonight with Ayasobana, and I'm Bhante Sudaso, and we'll be doing our weekly monk chat session, your opportunity to ask questions about Buddhism, and we'll do our best to give responses. So feel free to type in questions at any time. I see there's already a few questions typed in. That's wonderful. And we'll start with homage to the Buddha, and then we'll go through the questions and give some replies. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. Okay, so hello to all the people checking in already. Hello to Vivek, Anna Maria, Evgeny, Joseph, Eric, Lydia, Suj, Maria, Ryan, Mary, and everybody else who's joining in. Good to see all of you. So first question is from Vivek. Vivek says, as a lay follower, I try to balance being mindful with normal life and work. That said, because of the serene nature of meditation, I sense in some ways makes life harder to generally bear. Any advice? What do you think?
To the extent the ordinary activities of life are unwholesome, when you're mindful, it's very difficult to bear being in a situation which is unwholesome, whether it's being around people who are in a situation where there's pressure to compromise on one's ethics, or whether it's around a lot of distracting speech and activities that are useless and not forward to the Dhamma. So in a way, those things that used to seem entertaining are possible or not possible anymore. And so it sometimes happens that a person would shift their priorities, change their friends, limit the amount of time they spend with certain people, or even change their livelihood or change their work situation if they find that those things are not compatible with mindfulness. At the same time, it's also true that if you add compassion to the situation, that then it is possible to be with people who don't have the same wisdom or aspiration that you've gained, and just hold those situations with compassion.
Okay. And then Anna Maria says, should we stop a specific meditation practice if it makes us feel super uncomfortable, or that's just part of the journey? Well, I think that there's not enough information here to give a categorical reply, because it depends upon what the meditation practice is and what effect it's having on you. So sometimes the discomfort is because something is going directly against our defilements, and we don't actually want to go against our defilements because we're deeply attached to them and we think that's part of our identity, or we think it's a source of happiness, and there's some attachment like that makes us just not want to oppose our defilements. So sometimes that's the issue. Standard example of this is that people with strong greed tendencies tend to really dislike meditation practices that contemplate the drawbacks of sensuality. And also, often people with strong aversion tend to dislike doing loving kindness and compassion meditation. So the reason why there's that dislike is because those meditation techniques are going directly opposite one's primary defilements. But that also means that doing those meditation practices is going to be really good for you because it's helping to reduce those primary defilements. But sometimes a meditation practice feels uncomfortable because it's not actually getting good results for us. So just a simple example of this is many, many years ago, when I was still quite a bit newer to meditation practice, I found that when I would do mindfulness of breathing, I would have more anxiety rather than less. And when I went to speak to a senior monk about this, his advice was stop doing mindfulness of breathing and do some other meditation practices instead. And that was actually really good advice for me at the time. It's not that there's anything wrong with mindfulness of breathing per se, but rather it's that at that point in time in my practice, it wasn't helpful. I was not getting appropriate results. So that is something to consider. It's like, well, why is there discomfort? Is it discomfort because it's actually increasing unwholesome states of mind? Or is it just uncomfortable because we don't want to weaken our defilements because the defilements are connected to our self-identity? Or because it's going against some attachment of ours? So you need to look more closely. Why are you uncomfortable with it? And of course, this advice is only really relevant if you're practicing Buddhist meditation. If you're incorporating meditation techniques from outside the scope of Buddhism, then it's just not relevant to what we're talking about here, because it's not part of the conversation on Buddhist practice. So that is something to consider. So when people talk about meditation practices, they can be talking about many different ways of training the mind, which may have nothing whatsoever to do with Buddhism. So if you are actually doing a standard, recognized Buddhist meditation practice and it's making you uncomfortable, then you should investigate why. Is it actually that it's producing more defilements, which sometimes happens, but not very often? Or is it just because it's going against your own attachments and defilements? In which case you might want to keep pushing ahead with it. Those are my thoughts anyway. Do you have anything to add?
That's good.
Okay. And Evgenia says, how do you know if you've properly let go of a desire as opposed to just having disavowed it? For example, no longer consciously desiring something, but resenting people who have it.
Right. You've got to reflect and investigate about the Four Noble Truths, trying to understand it both in a reflective way and also within your own experience. And try to tune into the idea that every single time that dukkha arises for you, it's because of some craving, some desire, or something that you're clinging to. It could be that you have a lot of clinging and craving that you're not really aware of because it's sort of subconscious or hidden. You haven't yet you peel down that many layers of your inner work to realize the more subtle kinds of craving and desire and clinging that you have. But when suffering comes up, like in this example, having a resentment, okay, so that's the clue right there, that there is something you're clinging to or something that you desire. And if you then make that investigation with complete honesty and find out what it is that you crave, what you desire, and then find out how to release that desire and experience the relief from that particular dukkha. The Four Noble Truths is a great method of self-investigation. Every time you experience any kind of affliction, you should be glad and happy because your life has revealed to you something that's still remaining, that you still got some work to do, and given you a pointer. This is exactly where you need to be investigating and trying to find out what it is you've got to let go of.
Okay, and we have a question here from Joe. So Joe says, I really love how Anguttara Nikaya 9.5 highlights the supreme examples of the bonds of fellowship. The foremost giving is Dhammadana, the gift of Dhamma. The foremost speech is teaching Dhamma to the attentive. The foremost beneficial action is encouraging, settling, and establishing others in faith, virtue, generosity, and wisdom. And the foremost equality is when noble disciples are equal with one another. Stream mentor with stream mentor, once a turner with once a turner, etc. Could you kindly clarify the fourth, samanatata, equality, and explain why the Buddha says this example of noble disciples being equal with one another is the best expression of this quality? Well, Joe, I looked at the sutta just before we started, and first off, that's a bit of an odd usage of the term there, because the word samanatata more precisely means impartiality. And elsewhere in the suttas, it's used to talk about how one does not discriminate between people. An example of this is one of the great lay disciples of the Buddha, Uga, was, the Buddha said that he was one of the greatest in impartiality because he would make offerings indiscriminately to Sangha members. So even though Uga had psychic powers and he could read the monks' minds and he knew like, oh, that monk is a stream enterer, that one is a non-returner, that one is really lazy, that one doesn't follow the precepts, and that one doesn't meditate, he would still give to all of them equally without making any distinction between them. It wasn't like he would give the good food to the arhat and then little or no food to the sloppy monks. He would give the same quality and the same quantity to everyone. So that was held up as a great example of impartiality, of equality in the sense of non-discrimination between people. Non-discrimination, particularly in supporting members of the monastic sangha. So I must confess I'm not completely clear why in this sutta the Buddha says that the best kind of impartiality is the impartiality of sotapanna for a sotapanna, of a stream enterer for a stream enterer. I'm not really understanding what he's getting at here. So I actually don't really have a comment. Do you have any thoughts on this? What
Yeah,
this is
only
getting at?
that whatever particular class or family background, age, body type, or education doesn't make any difference. So the only thing that makes a difference is the attainment.
That's a really good point. Yeah, because that calls to mind then where the Buddha speaks about how just as if you had 4 rivers that all converge at the ocean, and you can't distinguish the waters of the different rivers once they're in the ocean. In the same way, people coming from all different castes, when they enter the monastic sangha, they're all just reckoned as monks. There's no distinction of what their birth origin was. So that might be what this is indicating then, that this is the impartiality or equality of not discriminating among different kinds of awakened beings based upon their irrelevant worldly conditions. So that actually does make a lot of sense. Okay. Because yeah, again, from a Buddhist perspective, the important thing is what Dhamma qualities somebody has cultivated in their heart, rather than whether they're from a high class or a low class, a wealthy family or poor family, whether they're well-educated or not well-educated, whether they're male or female or from this country or that country, like none of that actually matters. What matters is that we're trying to cultivate the Dhamma qualities in our heart. Okay, and Eric says, how does the varying degrees of karmic weight related to harming beings of different status, realm, human, animal, insects, etc., reconcile with ultimate reality, lack of inherent existence? Would be lack of hierarchy as well. What do you think?
I'm aware of that idea, the Dakini Vibhanga Sutta, which is about gifts. That's not about harming, it's about helping. But in that case, it gives the idea that helping an insect or an animal is less meritorious than helping a human being, or helping a virtuous human being is less meritorious than helping an enlightened being, and so on. And that sequence is actually given as a kind of a setup. That's a kind of like a conventional thinking, But the punchline of that teaching, or the most important aspect of the teaching, is at the very end. He says that even giving to a Buddha is less meritorious than giving to the Sangha, giving to the Bhikkhu Sangha or giving to the Bhikkhuni Sangha, and giving to the dual Sangha of Bhikkhus and Bhikkhunis is the most meritorious of all. So, in a way, I don't, I feel that this teaching has had, in some ways, an unfortunate effect if it causes Buddhists to feel that they should not be charitable towards bad people, and then they flock in a great mass if a monk comes to visit and they have a reputation, the word has gotten around that monk is an arahant, and then thousands of people come and they want to offer and offer and offer because they feel the merit of offering something to an arahant. That's a kind of a I don't think it's necessarily what the Dhamma is really about. And there are other verses in which it says that, I'm talking about helping rather than harming, but it says that ideal generosity is not like the scattered shower that just gives a little bit of water here and there, but like the monsoon in the rainy season, which soaks everything. And so that generosity that gives everywhere to everything. And likewise, I believe that the type of virtue that practices non-harming towards all creatures without any distinction, any discrimination, is the best kind of non-harming, the most powerful.
Yeah. Okay. Joe says, would you kindly expound on the three qualities of Atacharya in Anguttara Nikaya 9.5, Samadhi, Nivesati, Patitapati, and their Pali etymology? I mean, it's kind of getting into refinement of terminology, which actually isn't really that relevant. So Samadhi just means, again, inciting or invoking or encouraging. Nivesati means settling in, and Patitapati means establishing in. So there's not really a dramatic difference. The terms are they're not quite synonymous. There's a clear progression in that each one is a little bit stronger than the previous one, but the three verbs are all pointing at the same basic thing. So I wouldn't get too hung up on the details here. The basic meaning is already clear enough.
Very often in the suttas, you get a pile of verbs with very close meanings, and it's a kind of a rhetorical way of speaking that gives emphasis, and it also conveys that it's like inclusive, the complete way of conveying the Dhamma in this case in many different ways, and so it's that inclusiveness or that completeness that's being given by those near synonyms.
Okay, Eric, I think this was a continuation of the previous thing. Yeah. Saying in equanimity, i.e. all sentient beings, loving kindness, and the economist compassion of the Buddha. But I think you already covered that pretty thoroughly. Yeah. Okay. So Sudha's asking, Bhante Sudaso, after listening to many talks from you, I wonder where you learned Pali. From books. Yep. There's quite a number of books in English for helping English speakers learn Pali. And yeah, I just read those books and it was enough. So the really critical thing, you're asking for tips on how to learn Pali. The important thing is just to practice every day. I recommend devoting at least 15 minutes a day to studying Pali. And if you do that every day for a few years, then you'll know Pali. It's not a particularly complex language. It doesn't have a very big vocabulary. It's very precise and focused in the topics that it goes into because it's really just for Buddhist scriptures. So it's really not, it's not like learning Sanskrit. It's not like learning Latin or ancient Greek or something. It's actually much easier than learning most classical languages. Okay. Ryan says, when our senses are deeply engaged with interest, for example, reading, playing sports or music, and we are in the zone, so to speak, is this zone experience similar to Samadhi? What would you say?
It's slightly similar. Uh, there's a way that being absorbed or in the zone like that can cause you to become so engrossed in like the object or the project or the thing that you're doing that you lose your mindfulness and you don't have the self-awareness. Instead, you just get kind of like lost in the activity. And then at the end, when you emerge from it, it's almost like you're drunk or something like that, and waking up again. I used to have that experience in my past work. I had to work with spreadsheets and math, and just focusing on that, and then like an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours has gone by, and I'd come up for air, and I said, "What happened?" Because I lost the mindfulness. So, Samadhi has that absorption and mindfulness together. So that's the main difference.
Yeah, it's a good distinction. Yeah. Okay, Ryan says, Aya, could you describe what an epiphany or aha moment feels like?
I think it will depend on the individual what it feels like. There is so many metaphors of light, like when the Buddha said that wisdom arose from me, the light arose from me. And I guess the one feature that could come up is something like, it's like it's like the light bulb. The light bulb goes on, and one is able to see something that you couldn't see before because the light's turned on, or you feel that brightness. It's not a physical light, but it's like some kind of mental equivalency to a light coming on.
Okay. And okay, Joe's saying, I saw that October 10th is World Mental Health Day. May I request the Metta Sutta be chanted as a blessing for all beings on that day? Well, Joseph, you can definitely make sure that you chant it that day. So you can know for sure at least one person is chanting the Metta Sutta on that day. It may happen here at the monastery. We'll see. But you can make sure that you chant it at least and dedicate it to all beings. Evgeny says, is the current Mara the same one as the one who tempted the Buddha? And is it inevitable for Maras to be reborn in hell in their next birth? So one important thing to understand is that Mara is actually a category of beings. There's not one Mara, there's actually a lot of Maras. This is clearly mentioned a few places in the suttas. So there's a lot of Mara. So Mara is a category of Devas, which, interestingly enough, it's a positive rebirth. It's the result of strong good karma. Because Mara Devas are very powerful beings. They have ready access to a lot of pleasure, a lot of satisfaction, a lot of enjoyment, like all Devas. Mara Devas are on the higher end of the sensual sphere Devas, higher end of the Kamaloka Devas. And unfortunately, they also tend to have strong unwholesome habits, which means that they tend to do morally dubious behavior that tends to lead to them cultivating bad karma and therefore to being reborn in lower realms. So the Mara that we have the most information about is the one who tried to first convince the Buddha to not teach after the Buddha attained awakening, And then throughout the Buddha's lifetime, this particular Mara kept showing up to harass the Buddha or harass the bhikkhus and bhikkhunis and try to convince them to stop practicing or try to tempt them with worldly pleasures and distractions. And fortunately, he was mostly unsuccessful. With the Buddha, he was completely unsuccessful. With the other bhikkhus and bhikkhunis, his success varied. Is that Mara still alive and around? Probably. All devas tend to have extremely long lifespans, and Maras being in the higher realm of the Kamaloka, they would live for many, many thousands of years. So it could be the same Mara still around. It's possible. Yep.
So according to the tale of Upagupta, who was during the 300 years after the time of the Buddha, that Mara, the one who harassed the Buddha, became a disciple of the Buddha.
Oh, cute.
And requested precepts because, Upagupta bound Mara in order to prevent trouble during a particular festival. He tied him down in 5 places, and then Mara said, the Buddha defeated me so many times, but he was never so nasty like you. And when I compare you to the Buddha, it makes me want to be a disciple of the Buddha.
That's pretty cute.
Yeah.
Okay. However, unfortunately, there are other Maras. So even if that Mara is not harassing people anymore, there might be some other ones that are still doing their thing. Okay. Gregory says, one might go a long time with a calm mind and think they are practicing well, but then a strong event overturns one's mindfulness. How does one judge progress in the absence of these negative states?
It is useful to test your mindfulness by not permanently living in a very comfortable retreat center, but occasionally going into situations where you have to face people and tasks and work and difficult decisions and so on. It's for that reason that some teachers and some communities have the monks doing work that is like subjecting them to stress and not simply having a very soft life of nothing but meditation, so that they have a chance to test what they've gained in the meditation, so that then instead of your progress being like a hothouse tomato that can be overturned by a strong wind, instead it becomes like a robust tomato that's been subjected to some weather and is like strong enough to withstand it. But if you are subjected to some extremely stressful situation, then it's a chance to realize the value of what you've gained and really prioritize not losing what you've gained, no matter how stressful or how difficult the situation is. Like, it's at a time like that, you say, like, just let me not be angry, let me not be resentful, let me not let afflictions overwhelm me, no matter how challenging or upsetting the circumstance might be.
Yeah, I think this is part of why asceticism and austerity are a strongly encouraged aspect, especially of monastic practice, but also Buddhist practice in general, but especially of monastic practice, is that constantly having at least a little bit of discomfort helps to keep that edge on your practice, to make sure that your equanimity is not just the equanimity that comes from not having anything bothering you, but rather that your equanimity is actually the equanimity of being like, yeah, I'm hungry and I don't mind. Yeah, I'm cold and I don't mind. Or, yeah, I'm too hot and I don't mind. Or, yeah, these people are kind of rude and I don't mind. Like, there's a sense of invincibility when one's equanimity is being tested by austere or challenging conditions, but it is not broken. Whereas again, if you isolate yourself from all disturbing phenomena, then you might create the illusory experience of equanimity. But that's just the illusion that comes from being cut off from anything challenging. So actually deliberately having a little bit of austerity in one's life is a good way of making sure that your equanimity is genuine and not just the product of living in too comfortable of a way. Okay, and Julie says, Dear Venerables, are you of the Ajahn Chah lineage? Well, that depends on what you mean by the word lineage. In my case, I was ordained at a Ajahn Chah monastery by someone who was a disciple of Ajahn Chah. I was trained in that system, but I do not currently partake in that official system. So if by Ajahn Chah lineage, do you mean, am I officially a member of the international organization which inherited Ajahn Chah's legacy? Then the answer is no, I'm not a member of that organization. But if by Ajahn Chah lineage, do you mean, was I ordained and trained in the Ajahn Chah lineage? Then the answer is yes. So there's a distinction here between the lineage of teacher and student versus organizations or monastic fraternities or whatever you want to call them. And I actually don't recall, you were ordained in Sri Lanka, weren't you?
My training was with Bhante Gunaratana's.
Oh, that's right.
Bhante
Yeah.
Gunaratana's lineage, which is based on the suttas coming from Sri Lanka. And then my ordination lineage is from Sri Lanka, the Bhikkhuni order of Sri Lanka, which is descended from the Arahant Sanghamitta.
Yeah. Okay, and Julie says, what are your thoughts regarding how this bhikkhu openly shared that he was an arahant? Which bhikkhu?
Ajahn Chah.
Did he? I don't think Ajahn Chah ever openly declared he was an arahant. In fact, there was an interesting statement, there's an interesting thing which was recorded where somebody actually directly, publicly asked Ajahn Chah, are you an arahant? And Ajahn Chah evaded the question entirely. Like, he did not give a direct answer. And actually he said that he doesn't think of himself as anything at all. He said other people label him as various things, but he himself doesn't label himself as anything at all. So some people take that as him implicitly confirming, but that's just an assumption. So as far as I know, Ajahn Chah never specifically claimed to be an arahant or even hinted at it. But he had many disciples who closely observed his behavior and came to the conclusion that, in their opinion, Ajahn Chah was an arahant. So he is widely believed to have been an arahant, though as far as I know, he never directly said that he was, unless you're talking about a different monk. Maybe, Julie, if you can specify. Okay, so Lydia says, could you explain in simple practical terms how you bring mindfulness to the front or establish mindfulness as foremost?
Right. So I'm pretty sure that does not mean that you should concentrate on the tip of your nose. I think of it as putting, like if you say there are all of the possible objects, like in this room, there's many different objects. There's like books and statues and curtains and people and chairs and tables and cloth. There's many, many things. And sort of in the foreground here in this room, there's a camera, and even more in the foreground, there's this computer screen. So if I am looking very closely at the computer screen, then I don't see the books and the curtains and the statues and all the other things, because that's in the front. It's like the closest thing, and because it's close and because I'm absorbed, that then it like the mental space of my attention is filled up with attention being directed towards that object. So it's having the getting the ability to direct one's awareness towards one thing at a time and allowing the one thing to fill the field of awareness. It could be that that field of awareness is encompassing the entire body, or it could be that that field of awareness is just the arising of the breath, or just the thought of metta. There's many different types of objects, but it's that idea that one can direct the awareness towards an object and have that object fill the field of awareness. That's how I experience it.
Okay. And okay, so Hui Ling says, is this program live every day starting what time of your place in J? So we have live streams Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, New York time at 8 a.m. and 7:30 p.m. And some of the programs are done by people at other monasteries, but usually about half of them are done from people here. Joseph says, do you approve of translating samadhipeti as to kindle, that is, to kindle faith in the faithless? It's okay. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's a little loose, but it's okay. Sud says, is there such a thing as chulla sotapanna, someone who has mastered some second stage of knowledge? I was listening to a talk and heard a monk mention this. Is this from the suttas? I've never heard this term before. It's definitely not in the suttas. Have you heard this term, chulla sotapanna? Lesser sotapanna?
There is the person who has the sotapanna path and the person who's obtained the sotapanna fruition.
Yeah.
Maybe they meant the sotapanna path as being like a small sotapanna. This has been, I've heard it explained, but I don't necessarily find support in the suttas, but I've heard it explained that of the, let's say the three fetters that are destroyed by the stream entry, that if you lose one of the fetters, but not you haven't yet lost the other two, that then you're on the sotapanna path.
Okay. And Julie says, what physical form do Mara take on, if any? How do they influence? Is it through thought forms, through family and other people in our surroundings? So in the suttas, Mara is mentioned as taking several different forms. Sometimes Mara would appear in the form of a human, sometimes as an animal, sometimes he would or she would create sounds or images or other sensory impressions. Sometimes Mara would appear directly in one's thoughts. So Mara would take on whichever form was helpful for tempting, distracting, or confusing us. So any of the six senses is a viable avenue for Mara to invade.
Can I tell the rest of the story about Upagupta and Mara?
Yeah, go ahead.
So Upagupta became very jealous because he had never met Buddha, because this was 300 years later. And Mara had met the Buddha many, many times. And so he begged Mara to put himself in the form of the Buddha so he could know what the Buddha looked like. He said he would let him go if he would do that.
Uh-huh.
And Mara said, well, I can do that, but don't worship me. And so then he made himself to have the appearance of the Buddha, and Upagupta immediately bowed down and worshipped. And Mara said, no, do that, or else it'll be a disaster. And I said, I'm not worshiping you, I'm just worshiping the image. And this is supposed to explain why at that era of Buddhist history, the image of the physical form of the Buddha began to be popular.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay.
So Mara can take many forms.
Okay, Ryan says, I ask about these experiences we've all had to see if they're transferable into our practice. If we reflect how it feels like getting in the zone and apply mindfulness to our meditation, could deeper insights be more accessible? Honestly, I think that really the thing with meditation practice is to give yourself the opportunity for your mind to become still. While staying awake and alert, give the mind the opportunity to settle into stillness. And it will do so, sooner or later. Provided you're not constantly stirring it up the rest of the time, then the mind will settle into stillness as time goes by. Okay, Julie says, I'm talking about Ajahn Chah, and yes, I was referring to that which you described. It's accurate that he never explicitly said it, and I guess it is others who said that Ajahn Chah was an arhat. Yes, yeah. Again, I've talked to a number of monks who, again, knew Ajahn Chah personally, and had many even like very small-scale private conversations with Ajahn Chah, and none of them reported Ajahn Chah ever claiming to be an arhat. And yet all of them were just about 100% convinced that he was one. So he was apparently an incredibly impressive monk with remarkable wisdom and compassion, who was known for not displaying defilements ever, at least not in the later years of his life. Early years of his life, he was apparently a bit of a, how do you say this, firestorm? He was apparently quite a fiery monk when he was younger. But in his older years, he was known to be very kind and wise, seemed to be free of defilements. Was he an arhat? We don't know for sure. But a lot of people believe that he was because, again, in later years, his behavior was quite impeccable. So I don't know. I never met him. I'm only recounting stories of what others have told me. But again, the important thing to remember is that Ajahn Chah was just somebody who was trying to follow the Buddha's teachings. So that's what we should all be doing. We should all just be trying to follow the Buddha's teachings. So Diane says, if Mara's contempt meditators, is it possible that Devas could help us? Would it be out of line to ask for Devas to protect our practice? What would that look like? We do that all the time, actually. Rakantu sabba devata. May the Devas protect you. Yeah.
Right. I think of Devas being better if you need some kind of practical favor. So if you want to have no rain on a picnic, you could ask the Devas to help out with that. But if I wanted help with meditation, I would really try to get to know some wise people who make some kalyanamitas, and let those friendships give you the help. I mean, if you're looking for something that's outside of yourself that's going to help you, I think that's a more better type of help.
Yeah, what I do find helpful, which is somewhat related to this, is the concept of bodhisattvas. So I often relate to bodhisattvas as being Buddhist devas. So very advanced practitioners who have developed certain aspects of the Buddhist path extremely well, but that they're still in samsara. And so to me, that's a way of relating to this idea of invoking devas, which to me is actually relevant because, like, when I think of Avalokiteshvara, it's not like I'm now going to go and worship Shiva or something. It's like, no, this is somebody who is an icon of the Buddhist perfection of compassion, an icon of the Buddha's own compassion. So then what are we actually invoking? We're invoking one of the great praiseworthy qualities of the Buddhas, rather than like praying to some particular unenlightened entity. Okay. Madeline says, do you have any book recommendations for someone who is new to Buddhism? That would be a good starting point. What do you like to recommend?
I would like to recommend Bhante Sujata's book called A Swift Pair of Messengers, which is a very lovely, clear, and straightforward summary of the teachings.
Oh, it's a good one. Yeah, I usually recommend that people read Bhikkhu Bodhi's book, The Noble Eightfold Path. Very simple overview of the basics of the path. So there's a couple places to start. So it says, I have made a determination in this life to experience metta ceto vimutti. Can you give some advice as to how to practice in lay life to experience something like this? What are your recommendations?
So living the daily life in a way which is protecting the meditation. So then the actual idea or volition, intention for loving kindness for all the beings that you encounter throughout the day as a protection for the mind. And so that then when you come to the meditation, that you've got a really tranquil mind. And then the type of metta meditation, which is the boundless meditation radiating in all directions, is I think the most productive to get to that special kind of samadhi, which is called the liberation of the heart through metta.
Yeah. And Suzanne says, Aya, please explain how you dealt with physical pain in your practice.
I adopt a sitting meditation posture which is comfortable and which does not exacerbate the painful conditions that I have. So generally I practice meditation sitting in a chair, even though that's not as good as in some ways as having the full lotus or half lotus posture on a cushion. And I practice sitting and walking meditation in order to just on a practical level to be gentle with the body. And then internally I direct the mind and I try aim for like an equal, this is the one idea of equanimity, is the mind is equally interested in every mind moment that comes along. So rather than preferentially just focusing on the pain, instead giving equal attention to like all of the different sensations that could come up in the body, or towards all of the many changing aspects of the Vedana, or the different states of mind that can come along. So like the pain is never the only thing, it's never the completely dominant thing that's going on. There's a lot of different things going on. Finally, to make the investigation in terms of impermanence, to see whether the bodily pain always remains at the peak of intensity, or rather to see whether it comes and goes. And once you really can see easily how even bodily pain is so impermanent, is constantly rising and falling, coming and going, so then that gives you a lot of freedom because you can just wait it out and know that it's going to change.
Okay. And Julie says, it seems that one's senses are heightened, more sensitivity as one practices meditation and mindfulness. Is this accurate or just in my imagination? It's accurate. It is true. It's not that your senses themselves are any different, it's that you're paying closer attention to them. So that makes it seem more intense. It's just like if you turn up the volume. Like if you're listening to a piece of music, which you shouldn't because 8 precepts. But if you're listening to a piece of music and you can't hear it very clearly, so you turn up the volume. It's the same. Like when we're living our life without much mindfulness, then it's like the volume is down so low that you can't make out any of the details. So you turn up the volume and now you can hear everything much more clearly and distinctly. So it's the same. We're turning up the volume on our life, and therefore we're able to experience all of our senses in much, much higher detail. Of course, we're not doing that for the sake of having a better sensual experience. We're doing it for the sake of cultivating wisdom. Vanessa says, do you have any advice for remedying the habitual inclination of harsh speech?
Yeah. Try intentionally doing the opposite, even though it might feel kind of phony. But nevertheless, if you intentionally speak to somebody in a way which is sweet and gentle, it's very powerful because you did that on purpose. And if you, it's like, brushing your teeth. If you speak in a nice way to somebody 3 times a day for 2 weeks, already you're on the way to having a habit of gentle speech. Just do it. So the habits that you don't want to be strong, don't nurture those habits. You de-nourish those habits by doing something different.
Okay. And another thing I found useful sometimes is to just pay close attention whenever you're talking. Pay close attention to, first off, the attitude in your heart, and also how you're speaking. And if you catch yourself starting to speak in a harsh or aggressive or aversive way, stop. And something I found useful is to actually apologize to the other person and say like, oh, I'm sorry, wait, let me start over, let me try that again. And then deliberately soften your voice, deliberately settle your heart, bring up the memory of loving kindness, and then say what you're saying. So actually stopping yourself, and even like verbally acknowledging to the other person like, oh, I'm sorry, I said that a little bit too sharply. Let me do that again, please. And then really deliberately softening your heart and then continuing with what you're saying. I found that to be useful. And Hasanta says, are there any Buddha statues that have a shaven head rather than a head of hair? There are, but they're very rare. They're very rare. And this is because the depiction of the Buddha with the, especially the top knot of hair on his head, very early on in Buddhist history became iconic of representing the Buddha. So although the Buddha most likely did actually have a shaved head, as we do, or extremely short hair, it nonetheless has become just a standard icon, so that actually when you see that hairstyle, people, especially people who are familiar with Buddhism, they immediately think of the Buddha. You can sometimes find statues where the Buddha has a fully shaven head, but it's extremely uncommon. Because again, this is what people immediately associate with the Buddha. There have been a number of attempts in Buddhist history of people trying to change Buddhist iconography, and clearly results have not been successful. So this is what we've got.
Okay, the book is Wings to Awakening by Bhante Sujato.
No, Swift Pair of Messengers.
Oh, sorry, Swift Pair of Messengers. Thank you.
Swift Pair of Messengers. Yep. Wings to Awakening is a different book.
Yeah.
That's also a decent book, but I haven't read it in about 15 years.
Yeah.
So I don't actually remember it clearly. Joseph says, is there a Pali word directly related to kindness? In English, kind comes from kin, treating others like family. Kindness means benevolence based on kinship. Is there a Pali word with a similar root, like metta or anukampa, that connects to the sense? A Pali word that means kindness but has a root related to family or kinship. I actually can't think of one off the top of my head. Do you?
Sangha?
Sangha? Sangha literally means holding together. So that does have a sense of it. Yeah, I think I wouldn't get too hung up on it, Joseph. Yeah, it's not.
So, like a metta is based on maitri, which means a friend, and then a friend is sort of like a type of a kin.
Yeah, anukampa means trembling together. There's a couple other words in Pali, but none of them that I can think of are directly related to family. So I wouldn't worry about it. It's just languages. Anuddhaya, Daya, I'd have to double check, but I think those are actually related to the root that means to give. So I don't think that, yeah, it definitely doesn't relate to family, but I don't think so. And that's the last question, so we'll go ahead and conclude at this time with 3 more sadhus. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And we'll see you all next time.